Today we want to look at the anthropology of St. Thomas Aquinas to understand how he viewed human beings. And a secondary goal is to compare and contrast that with St. Augustine's. Now, one can say that Aquinas was more optimistic than Augustine about human nature. I want to be very clear about that, however. He was more optimistic than Augustine. Don't make the mistake of believing he had an optimistic view of humans in the sense that he believed that all human activity and all human nature was good. What he basically believed was that, yes, original sin scarred who we were and our relationship with God, but it did not rob us entirely of our natural goodness. So he differed from Augustine on that point, whereas Augustine believed that original sin, our own sinfulness, essentially took away God's likeness within us. We were still God's image, but God's likeness was gone, and only grace could restore it. For Aquinas, there remained active in our lives, even without God's direct intervention, God's grace in our lives. Now, I want to start by asking a question. What makes for human happiness? If you think about our notions of what makes for a happy life, what do you think about? Do you think about our celebrities and the lifestyles they enjoy? Do you think about the various pleasures of life? For Aquinas, those things don't even begin to count toward happiness. He distinguished three different levels of what we would refer to as happiness. And what we often consider happiness, he would say, is just life's pleasures. He calls them enjoyments. Enjoyments are fine, but they have nothing to do, in Aquinas' view, with human happiness. For Aquinas, to understand what makes for human happiness, you have to understand what it is to be a human. And for Aquinas, what makes humans unique is our ability to reason. And for Aquinas, the only object that can satisfy reason is truth. And so a dog or a monkey or certainly a rose bush would never have the capacity for reason. Therefore, they could find happiness, your dog can find happiness, without contemplating truth. But a human will ultimately only be satisfied, will only find happiness if they are in possession of some sort of truth. Now, many people stand back and say that neither philosophy nor theology are practical, that the most practical things in life, math and science, perhaps the arts, yes, they serve human functioning in a very direct way. But for Aquinas, those things are very secondary, that really what comprises happiness is things like theology and philosophy. It's beginning to pursue truth and to come to some possession of it. So for Aquinas, we can achieve some happiness in this life because we can, to a certain degree, contemplate the truth. I can come to know God, at least to a certain degree in this life. And for Aquinas, we can also cultivate the virtues. Last year in ethics, you should have studied the virtues from Aristotle, and Aquinas borrowed a lot from Aristotle. And virtues like courage, like friendship, like moderation. These things, as we cultivate them, they will bring us happiness. As I become a better friend, I become happier. As I develop a sense of being just toward others, living in moderation, I develop a certain happiness. And that, Aquinas said, is possible in this life. However, Aquinas held on to the idea that in this life we can never find perfect happiness because we will never have the fullness of truth. It's just impossible. That sin, that our condition, our sinful condition, prevents us from truly ever capturing the essence of God. And that alone, again, is what's going to get us happiness. Also, what Aquinas said, Aristotle missed were the theological virtues. You may have heard about them. They are often mentioned when we hear the readings from St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians. We almost know them from memory. St. Paul says there are three things that last. What are they? Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these three is love. And so for Aquinas, these theological virtues of faith, hope, and love are ultimately what bring us to happiness. But in this life, again, while we can love, we will never love perfectly. We will never love 100%. We will never love ourselves 100%. So we can't love others 100%. We can't love God 100%. And so perfect happiness will elude us. Yet it is in our nature to move toward happiness. That's how he's more optimistic. That all of our actions, according to Aquinas, all of them, are directed toward our happiness. Even the masochist, the person who wants to feel himself or herself suffer, is driven by a desire for happiness. Their own suffering, they believe, will bring them happiness. So for Aquinas, what is sin? Sin is missing the mark. Think of an arrow and think of the bullseye. And when we are truly happy, we're hitting that bullseye because we're being virtuous and we're seeking after truth. But very often our actions miss the mark. But we're attempting to hit the mark. We think we're going toward our happiness. If you cheat on a test, it's not because you think the action of cheating on a test or cheating on a paper is going to make you unhappy. You go into that knowing that it's not very virtuous, but you'll do it because you believe that getting a higher grade will make you happy. For Aquinas, it is a sin because ultimately that act of cheating will not make you happy. So that is sin, missing the mark. But we are always, as the archer, attempting to hit the bullseye, the mark. We are always looking after happiness. That is our very purpose.